There was a woman who came to my consulting room many years ago. She was 53, but the moment she stepped through the door, I would have sworn she was no older than 35. Her eyes carried that strange, lucid brightness one usually finds in children who have not yet learned to be afraid of the world. And yet when she began to speak, I realized something far more interesting than her appearance. She did not know she looked young. She had no vanity about it. She was, in a sense, indifferent to her own face. And it was precisely this indifference, this absence of war with herself, that had kept time from carving its full inscription upon her. I remember sitting in my chair that afternoon and thinking how curious it is that the body, which we believe to be a purely biological machine, listens so attentively to the soul. How curious that a woman who had never asked to remain young had been granted that some quiet alchemy within her, the very thing others spent fortunes chasing. And how tragic, by contrast, that I had also seen men of 40 whose faces seemed already prepared for the grave, not because of illness, not because of poverty, but because something inside them had stopped speaking to life. You see, the question of why some people look younger than their age is not at its root a question of genetics or cosmetics. Those are surface explanations, and surface explanations have always bored me. The deeper question is this: what is it within the human psyche that either preserves or destroys the body's relationship with time? Why does the soul of one person seem to keep his face open, fluid, alive, while the soul of another seems to close his face like a tomb? This is one of the most overlooked mysteries of depth psychology, and what I am about to share with you may unsettle some of your most cherished assumptions about aging. Let us begin where all genuine inquiries must begin, in the unconscious. The face you carry is not merely a structure of bone and tissue. It is, in the most literal sense, a living document. Every emotion you have refused to feel, every truth you have swallowed, every resentment you have nursed in the dark hours, every joy you have permitted yourself, all of it is being written, slowly and patiently, upon your features. The face is the unconscious made visible. And those who look younger than their age have, almost without exception, kept some channel open between themselves and the deeper layers of their psyche. I observed this again and again in my patients. The man who had spent 40 years suppressing his grief had a face like cracked stone. The woman who had finally permitted herself to weep after decades of holding herself together returned to my office months later, looking 10 years younger, not because anything in her circumstances had changed, but because something within her had been released. The body is a vessel. When the vessel is full of unmoved water, it stagnates, and stagnation always wears the face of premature age. When the water moves, the vessel itself remains young. This is not metaphor. This is observation. But the most surprising part is yet to come, because the principle that governs this phenomenon is not gentle. It is not the principle of positive thinking. It is something far older, far more ruthless, and far more honest. The ancients knew it. The alchemists encoded it in their symbols. And modern man, in his obsession with youth, has almost completely forgotten it. The principle is this: youth is preserved not by the avoidance of pain, but by the integration of it. Consider the alchemical sequence, which I studied for decades and which I came to see as the most accurate map of the human soul ever drawn. The alchemists spoke of asterisk, negrido asterisk, the blackening, the descent into darkness, the moment when everything within the alembic turns to rot and ash. They believed, and I came to believe with them, that no transformation is possible without this descent. Nothing becomes gold without first becoming black. And here is the secret hidden in plain sight. Those who have undergone their asterisk, microido asterisk, those who have faced their own darkness, mourned their own losses, reckoned with their own shadow, emerge with something the world cannot manufacture. They emerge with a face that has been washed clean by truth. Have you ever met a man or woman who has clearly suffered, truly suffered? Not the cosmetic suffering of inconvenience, but the real descent, and yet their face seems somehow lighter, more luminous, more present than the faces around them. This is not coincidence. This is the asterisk albedo asterisk, the whitening that follows the blackening. The soul that has gone through its winter and come out the other side carries a particular quality of light, and that light shows itself undeniably in the face. Meanwhile, those who have spent their lives avoiding the descent, who have refused to mourn what must be mourned, who have built their entire personality as a wall against their own depths, these are the ones whose faces age most cruelly. Not because they have lived more, but because they have lived less. Their faces show the strain of a soul that has been holding its breath for 40 or 50 years. The body, which is far more honest than the mind, eventually betrays the cost of that pretense. What mythology has been trying to tell us for centuries is precisely this paradox. Look at the figure of Demeter, who descended into grief when her daughter Persephone was taken into the underworld. The earth itself grew old in her sorrow. Winter came, the leaves fell, everything withered. But when Persephone returned, when the descent had been honored and completed, the earth grew young again. Imagine if Demeter had refused to grieve. Imagine if she had insisted, in the manner of our modern world, on remaining cheerful, productive, optimistic. The earth would have remained in eternal winter. The eternal denial of darkness produces an eternal absence of light. The people who look younger than their age are not the people who have escaped suffering. They are the people who have allowed suffering to do its work. They have permitted the asterisk nigrido asterisk. They have descended, returned, and been changed by the journey. And the change, paradoxically, is a kind of youthfulness, not the youthfulness of inexperience, which is merely the absence of life, but the youthfulness of integration, which is the presence of life lived fully and consciously. There is another factor I observed in these patients, and it relates to what I came to call the asterisk persona asterisk, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. Every human being requires a persona. The mask allows us to function, to work, to belong, but there is a particular kind of suffering that comes when the mask grows too rigid, too thick, too far removed from what lies beneath it. When the persona becomes a prison rather than a tool, the face begins to die from the inside out. The features harden, the eyes lose their light, the smile becomes a performance rather than an expression. I notice that those who look younger than their age have almost always a flexible relationship with their persona. They wear it when they need it and set it aside when they do not. They are not their mask. They have not confused the costume with the actor. And because they have preserved this distinction, the face beneath the mask remains alive, responsive, capable of genuine expression. There is movement there. There is breath. There is, in the truest sense, a person looking out from behind the eyes, not a role, not a function, not a brand, but a living human being. Compare this to the man who has spent 30 years being only his job title, only his social role, only the version of himself he believes the world demands. His face will in time become indistinguishable from his persona, and a persona is by definition a dead thing, a mask carved into a fixed expression. When the face becomes the mask, aging accelerates with terrifying speed. The body, sensing that no living soul is using it for genuine expression, begins to retire from the work of being alive. What Jung said about this is deeply unsettling, and I will say it now plainly. Many people are already half dead by the age of 40, and their faces show it. Not because life has been cruel to them, but because they have refused to be present in their own lives. They have outsourced their existence to roles, expectations, ambitions imposed from outside. The body cannot remain young when the soul has gone into hiding. The flesh follows the spirit, always. Now, I wish to speak of something more delicate because there is another factor at play, and it concerns the relationship between the conscious self and what I call the asterisk, anima asterisk in men, and the asterisk, anima asterisk in women, the contrasexual element within each of us. When this inner figure is honored, when she is permitted to speak, when he is allowed his rightful place in the inner household, something remarkable happens. The face becomes balanced. The masculine and feminine within the person come into a kind of harmony, and that harmony shows itself outwardly. The features soften without becoming weak. The eyes acquire depth without becoming heavy. There is, in short, a kind of inner marriage that has occurred, what the alchemists called the asterisk conjunctio asterisk, and the result is a face that does not need to perform youth. because it has integrated the eternal aspects of being. I have seen this in old men whose faces seemed almost feminine in their tenderness, and in old women whose features carried a quiet masculine strength. These were people who had completed, or at least made significant progress in, the great inner work. They had married the opposites within themselves. They were not young in the chronological sense, but they were young in the only sense that matters. They were still becoming. They were still in motion. The detail most people overlook hides precisely here. We assume that aging is a linear process, that each year adds equally to the burden, that time is the only variable. But time, I came to believe, is far less important than what one does with time. A person who has spent 30 years in genuine inner work is in psychological terms far younger than the chronologically younger person who has spent his years in unconscious drift. The lived conscious year carries youth, the unlived unconscious year carries decay. This brings me to the matter of the shadow, which is perhaps the most important factor of all. The shadow is everything within ourselves that we have refused to acknowledge, our rage, our envy, our laziness, our pettiness, but also our unlived greatness, our unexpressed creativity, our buried courage. Most people imagine the shadow as purely negative. They are mistaken. The shadow contains the rejected light as well as the rejected darkness. And here is what I observed clinically, again and again. Those who look younger than their age have made peace in some measure with their shadow. They have not banished it. They have not pretended it does not exist. They have looked at it, acknowledged it, and brought parts of it back into the light of consciousness. The cost of refusing this work is enormous, and it is paid, among other places, in the face. Every quality you have rejected in yourself does not vanish. It goes underground where it festers, and it returns in the end as a tightness around the mouth, a hardness in the eyes, a certain grim quality that settles into the features over decades. The face of the man who has refused his shadow is the face of a man who is at war with himself, and that war ages him faster than any disease. Meanwhile, the face of the man who has befriended his shadow has the relaxed quality of someone who is no longer fighting. And the absence of inner war is the secret of preserved youth. Here begins the darkest game of the unconscious. The modern world has constructed an enormous industry around the appearance of youth, creams, surgeries, treatments, regimens, and yet, despite all of this, the faces of modern people often look older than the faces of their ancestors at the same age. How is this possible? How can a generation with so many resources for the preservation of youth produce so many prematurely aged faces? The answer, I believe, lies in what I call the loss of soul. Modern man has gained the world and lost his connection to the deeper layers of his being. He no longer dreams meaningfully. He no longer participates in ritual. He treats his own depths as a kind of inconvenient basement to be ignored, sealed off, perhaps occasionally medicated. And the body knows, the face knows. You cannot fool the face. It will not be deceived by external interventions when the inner life is starving. The people who look younger than their age have somehow preserved this connection. They may have no theoretical vocabulary for it at all, but they have maintained a living relationship with what lies beneath the surface of consciousness. They dream, and they remember their dreams, and they take them seriously. They feel their feelings, even the inconvenient ones. They allow themselves to be moved by music, by nature, by other human beings, by the strange and silent whisper of the self. And this aliveness, this inner movement, manifests outwardly as a quality of presence in the face that no cosmetic procedure can replicate. I want to tell you about another patient, a man this time. He was 68 when he came to me, and his presenting complaint was that he was suddenly, unaccountably, looking and feeling much younger than he had at 55. He was puzzled by it. His friends were beginning to comment on it. He had not changed his diet, his habits, his routines. He was not in love. He had not undergone any cosmetic intervention. What had changed? When I worked with him, the answer became clear within a few sessions. At 65, after a lifetime of being a respectable, conventional, somewhat constricted man, he had finally begun to write the novel he had wanted to write since he was 20. He had not published it. He did not even intend to publish it. He was simply writing it alone in the evenings for himself. And this small act, this honoring of an unlived part of himself, this redemption of a long-buried creative impulse, had reorganized his entire psychic economy. The unlived life that had been weighing him down for 40 years was finally being lived. And the body, sensing that the soul had returned home, had responded by becoming young again. This is one of the most common patterns I observed. The unlived life is the heaviest burden the body can carry. When that burden is set down, even partially, the face changes. The shoulders change. The walk changes. There is a return of vitality that borders on the miraculous, but is in fact entirely natural. It is what the soul does when it is finally permitted to breathe. The real turning point begins right here, in the recognition that aging is not primarily a biological process. It is a psychological one. Or rather, it is biological, but the biology is responsive to the psychology in ways far deeper than mainstream science is yet willing to acknowledge. The body is not a machine that runs down on a fixed schedule. It is an organism in continuous dialogue with the psyche, and the quality of that dialogue determines, to a remarkable degree, the rate at which time inscribes itself upon the face. Consider also the phenomenon of meaning. Human beings can endure almost any amount of physical hardship if they have meaning, and almost no amount of comfort if they do not. Those who live without meaning, who have no sense of why they are here, no relationship with anything larger than themselves, these people age catastrophically, regardless of their material circumstances. The face becomes hollow. The eyes lose their focus. There is a specific quality of premature aging that I came to associate with what I call the loss of myth in modern life. By contrast, those who have found or made or stumbled into a sense of meaning retain a quality of youthfulness regardless of their hardships. The face remains directed, focused, alive. There is a forward motion in the features that defies the backward pull of time. Meaning is the most powerful anti-aging substance the human psyche has ever discovered, and it cannot be bought, manufactured, or prescribed. It can only be lived. Now I must say something that may seem strange, but which I believe to be true. The people who look younger than their age have in some sense made friends with death. This sounds like a paradox, but it is not. Those who deny death, who refuse to think about it, who organize their entire lives around its avoidance, these are the ones who age most quickly and most bitterly. The denial of death is exhausting. It drains the soul of energy that might otherwise be spent on the work of being alive. But those who have, at some point, sat with the reality of their own finitude often acquire a strange lightness. They become more present, more available, more willing to risk being themselves. And this presence shows in the face. There is a particular quality of the eyes, a particular quietness around the mouth that I came to recognize as the mark of someone who has integrated mortality into their conscious experience. Such people often look younger than their years because they are no longer wasting energy on the pretense of immortality. The alchemists knew this. The final stage of their work was not the asterix, albedo asterix, but the asterix, rubedo asterix, the reddening, the stage of full life, full color, full embodiment. The asterix, rubedo asterix could only be reached after the asterix, negredo asterix, and the asterix, albedo asterix. After the descent into darkness, after the purification, came the return to life, but a different life, a transformed life, lived now in full awareness of its temporary nature. This is the secret of the redness in the cheeks of those who have done the inner work. It is not the redness of mere physical health. It is the redness of a soul that has come back from the descent and is now living, finally, in the fullness of its own knowing. There is one more factor, and it is perhaps the most overlooked of all. Those who look younger than their age have preserved the capacity for genuine wonder. They are still capable of being surprised. They have not yet decided that they know everything, that they have seen everything, that nothing is new under the sun. And this capacity for wonder is the single most reliable predictor of facial youthfulness. Wonder is what keeps the eyes alive. The moment a person decides that he has the world figured out, his eyes go flat. The light leaves them. The micro-movements that signal active engagement with reality begin to disappear. By contrast, the person who remains capable of wonder, who can still be moved by a sunset, by a piece of music, by a child's question, by the strange recurrence of a meaningful coincidence. This person's eyes remain in motion, and the face around them remains young. There is in this a great paradox. To preserve youth, one must befriend depth. To remain young in the face, one must be willing to grow old in the soul. The shallow man who refuses inner aging, who insists on remaining psychological adolescent, ages most rapidly in his features. The man who has aged deeply, who has done the work of becoming, often retains a remarkable youthfulness in his appearance. Inner aging produces outer youth. Inner stagnation produces outer decay. This inversion is one of the most important discoveries depth psychology has to offer. So when you look at someone who appears younger than their years and ask yourself, what is their secret? Understand that the answer is almost never what the cosmetic industry would have you believe. The secret is rarely a cream, rarely a regimen, rarely a procedure. The secret is, in almost every case, a particular relationship with the inner life, a willingness to descend, a capacity for wonder, a refusal to be entombed by one's persona, a friendship with the shadow, an honoring of the contrasexual element, a relationship with meaning, an acceptance of mortality, and perhaps above all, a refusal to die before one is dead. Most people die long before their physical death. They die at 30 or 40 or 50 when they decide that the adventure is over, that the questions are settled, that no further transformation is possible. From that moment forward, they are merely waiting, and the body knows it, and the face shows it. The face becomes a death mask worn by a man who is still technically breathing. But there are others, fewer, but they exist, who refuse this premature death, who continue to ask questions, who continue to be transformed, who continue to descend, to integrate, to become. These are the people whose faces seem to defy time, not because they have escaped it, but because they have entered into a different relationship with it. Time does not destroy them, because they are using time for the work it was meant for, the work of becoming who they truly are. And so the question I would leave you with is this: are you living, or are you merely waiting? Is your soul still in motion, or has it gone still? Is there still a question alive within you? Still a descent waiting to be made? Still a part of yourself you have not yet met? Because if there is, then the work of preserving your youth is not the work of fighting time. It is the work of becoming, finally, the person you were always meant to be. When that becoming is honored, the face will follow. It always does. The body will give back what the soul gives forward. And you may find that the years which once seemed to be carving themselves into your features begin instead to soften them. That the lines that come are no longer the lines of bitterness, but the lines of laughter, of depth, of a life lived with consciousness. This is the alchemy that no laboratory can replicate. This is the goal the alchemists were truly seeking. The mirror is waiting. The unconscious is waiting. The self, which is the central mystery of every human life, is waiting for you to turn and meet it. When was the last time you looked at your own face and saw a stranger looking back? And when you do, what will you say to him?